Yeah, you're right. This is hard to make, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's an important part of history. It's something that we wanted to see. It's something that shouldn't be forgotten, but it's kind of hard to talk about.
Hey there, happy travelers. This video is going to be a little bit different for us. If you've been watching our latest video series, you'll know that we are exploring Poland. We've been here for a little over a week now. And today we visited the Auschwitz concentration camps located about an hour outside of Krakow.
We had a hard time deciding whether or not we wanted to make a video about Auschwitz, but it's an important part of history, and I think it's important to talk about.
We didn't want to do one of our normal types of videos because Auschwitz is obviously a somber, reflective memorial site. We didn't think that would be respectful, so we're kind of doing a recap of our experience from today.
So first, let's get into some technical information about Auschwitz. Auschwitz is located about 60 kilometers away from Krakow, and there's a few different ways that you can get there. You can either get there by private car or taxi, you can take a bus, or you can take the train.
The public transportation options are going to be a lot cheaper, but they're also going to take longer. Visiting Auschwitz can be a little bit confusing because there are actually two different sites. So the two different sites are Auschwitz I and Auschwitz II Birkenau, and there's actually a shuttle bus in between them if you end up going by yourself. They're both really different, and if you're going to go to one, you might as well go to the other because that will really round out your educational experience.
Tickets to Auschwitz are actually free, but you still have to make a reservation. That just ensures that you'll get a time slot that you're allowed to go in. However, if you want a tour guide, that ticket costs a little bit more money. For us, we decided to go the tour guide option because we wanted to just have a little bit more history and information as we were visiting the site.
And you should know if you want to visit the sites by yourself without a tour guide, those slots are only available at certain times of the day, and you will want to make those reservations in advance.
The tour that we booked included transportation picking us up straight from our hotel in Krakow.
Our driver also arranged a guide for us as we were considered part of a group. One of the benefits about being part of a group and having a tour already arranged for you is that they do the tickets, they do the guide, you get to skip the line, you don't have to worry about reservations, all that's taken care of for you. As we said, it's a little bit more expensive, but it really helps with convenience and you don't have to worry about any of that stuff yourself. You can just show up there and get a ticket and hope to get in. You run the risk of waiting in a super long line and possibly not being able to get in at all because all the slots are taken.
With that private car, it took us about an hour and a half to get to Auschwitz from Krakow.
So double that when you're coming back, so that's about 3 hours of driving. On public transportation, that could be up to twice as long. And if you get guided tours of both sites like we did, we took about 5 hours total. You're gonna wanna carve out a whole day for the experience. So on our tour, and I read other reviews of other tours, this seems to be pretty common. On the drive to Auschwitz, they show you a little documentary. It was a video about the liberation of the camp, and it was pretty graphic.
Yeah.
That is definitely a trigger warning. We'll just leave it at that. It was relatively graphic. After our drive, we arrived at Auschwitz I first, and there is a pretty hefty security check. They check your ID along with your ticket to make sure it matches.
They'd limit the size of bags that you're allowed to bring in. Essentially, you're allowed one small bag or backpack. I did see an area to check your luggage, although it didn't look like it was open when we were there.
You're allowed to bring in water and stuff like that, and they do have a few restaurants and places where you can buy snacks. You're not allowed to eat in the Auschwitz sites just for conservation. They'll tell you when you can drink and when you're not allowed to.
After that, you're given a headset and a receiver, which makes it a little easier to hear your tour guide as you're walking around.
Our tour group had about 30 people, and they want you to be able to hear your tour guide without your tour guide having to speak loudly. Auschwitz I used to be a Polish military base, so there are rows of brick buildings that they take you around.
The whole area is surrounded with barbed wire and electric fences. So once you go through that, it really hits you what kind of place this was. Photography is allowed in most areas, but they don't want you to use flash, and there are a few spots where they ask you not to film. Keep in mind, this is a memorial site and a spot of great human suffering, so when you are taking photos, just be respectful and use your best judgment.
The different buildings our guide took us in had different, what they called exhibits. There were photographs that were actually taken from the camps themselves, which were very interesting to see.
We learned a little bit about what it was like to arrive at the concentration camp, the sorting process, what some of the people experienced as they came in on trains.
None of the photos we saw in the actual camp were graphic though, which was appreciated, I think.
Definitely.
However, you will see really, really large collections of
personal items from the victims. There was a room that was full of eyeglasses, thousands of them, very large room full of shoes that were collected as these people were, stripped of their belongings and killed, suitcases, pottery. Earlier I mentioned that there are some areas that you're not allowed to film. One of those is an exhibit that has human hair that they collected from 40,000 people.
They would shave the victims' heads as soon as they got to the camp, and they actually used this human hair in different processes, which we won't go into. That was probably the most graphic of the exhibits.
Yeah, that part was pretty emotional. Just seeing all the people stripped of their belongings like that and how it was just thrown into piles. That was a little tough to see.
This is tough.
Yeah, this is a little hard to talk about. In the first camp, we also saw an area where they would line prisoners up to be executed. There were a lot of flowers there now. That was a pretty emotional spot to see for me.
Keep in mind, you will be seeing sites where a lot of people died. Even if you don't see graphic photos of it,
it's still very somber. I felt a little more removed than expected. Going into it, I thought I'd get more emotional at the spot. It definitely drained you emotionally, but I didn't feel like I was getting choked up at any moment.
Our guide was not emotional at all. He was very matter of fact. He was very subjective.
I'm sure that helped a little bit.
Yeah, but there weren't many individual stories or personal stories from any of the victims. It was just straight facts, which probably helps visitors feel a little bit more at ease. I don't know if that's the right thing to say.
Either. Yeah, you're right. This is hard to make, isn't it?
Yeah.
This is part of the reason that we struggled with whether we should create a video about this or not, because it's an important part of history. It's something that we wanted to see. It's something that shouldn't be forgotten, but it's kind of hard to talk about. I'm glad that we visited, but I don't really know what to say. I would say, though, that the most emotional part of the tour, though, was when we went into the gas chambers. Most of the gas chambers at both sites were destroyed by the Nazis right before they retreated, but there's one that's still standing. The tour actually takes you inside that gas chamber.
You don't spend much time in there. You kind of just shuffle through, but it is intact and, as our guide told us, largely unchanged from when it was used for that purpose in the 1940s, which was really tough.
Yeah, it was a hard thing to see.
So your tour of the first site will take a couple of hours. The second site is Auschwitz II Birkenau, which is a huge, huge site. It's much bigger than the first site.
This area was a lot more open and a little bit colder as well. Something that we should mention is that a lot of the time you are outside, so be prepared for the weather. We went in December and it was pretty cold, so make sure you wear good footwear. We were walking over ice and snow.
And mud.
We saw one of the rail cars that prisoners were brought in on. They talked a bit about the sorting.
There were a lot more barracks where prisoners were held, and you do go into one of those.
Yeah, one of the bunkhouses where prisoners were held.
At the second site, the gas chambers have been largely destroyed, so they are rubble, but the ruins are there. Mm-hmm. You can go see those. and you'll do a big loop with a lot of walking. So the second site takes a little less time to see, probably about an hour and a half. But overall, with the driving and seeing both sites, it is going to be a full day.
Personally, I'm glad that we went the tour route. I think that it was good to have some information. We could ask questions if we wanted to. It was nice to learn a little bit more of the history about it. I'm really glad that we went and did it. It was hard. Yeah,
I was afraid, I guess is the word that I would use. Afraid of how tough it was going to be, how emotional it was going to be. And it was tough. But the Polish government, they want you to go. There was active conservation at the site, so they are keeping up these sites. They do want people to go. They want people to remember what happened at these camps.
Yeah, it's definitely an important part of history that should not be forgotten. And the Polish government is doing everything they can to make sure that this site remains intact and people come to visit it. So we kind of were on the fence whether we should go or not, but we're really glad. It's definitely worth going to see, but be prepared to be quite emotionally drained afterwards.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't want to do anything for the rest of today at all. So we're just going to stay in our hotel room because it was a really somber experience, something that should be seen and should be remembered.
Definitely add it to your Polish itinerary if you come. Poland, what we've seen so far is awesome, and you should definitely come here.
So be sure to go and check out the rest of our Poland videos. We've done a lot of really cool things while we've been here, and they are a little more lighthearted than this video was. Travel and history isn't always super happy, you know, but it's equally important. That's why we wanted to make this video. Let us know if you have any questions. We did our best to kind of give an overview of what you need to know, but as you can probably see, we kind of struggled making this one a little bit. So in the comments, if you have any questions, be sure to hit us up and we'll try to help you plan your trip in any way that we can.
Thanks so much for watching. Our next video will be back to our old selves.
Yeah.
Don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you can check out our upcoming adventures, which are going to be awesome. This is Kelly and Kevin from the Awkward Tourists. Peace out. Fly standby, and luckily we've got seats on this one, so we're at least going to the Netherlands for a night.